Given the scale of the current crisis, what measures can be taken to mitigate further economic decline, especially considering the 26% contraction during the 2020 crisis?
Yeah, good evening, everybody. I think it's pretty difficult to design what would be the best measure. We have to take into account that there is a global slowdown. So clearly, Lebanon is in the middle of this war that we hope will end as soon as possible. But it's not the only geopolitical tension we're experiencing at the moment. But more important, we have an incredible global slowdown. So starting from China, US, yes, is growing faster than what other parts of the world are experiencing, but actually is extremely unstable and weak, the fundamental of this final push of growth. So the problem is that we are experiencing the imbalances globally, and particularly on the growth. Think about what China is trying to do over the last 2 weeks with an apparently an unprecedented fiscal stimulus that then faltered over the last 2 days. We are expecting this Saturday, the 12th, the Minister of Finance to eventually reposition themselves on a bigger fiscal expansion. Europe is having trouble in finding a firm path on fiscal expansion as well. So the problem is not just Lebanon itself, that is obviously
yes, but Lebanon domestically has major problems. Never has Lebanon faced the power vacuum that it's facing right now. And I'm talking about all institutions, not just economic institutions. You've got vacuuming political institutions. You've got the central bank of Lebanon, which is Banque du Liban, has a clear vacuum there. In 2023, the interim governor has been, or the governor has stepped down, and an interim governor stepped in. Until now, they can't actually appoint a governor for the central bank. So there's domestic problems and challenges facing Lebanon. It's not just global. What do you think of this?
Absolutely. But clearly, when you face, and it's not the first time Lebanon is facing domestic problem, but obviously when there is a good momentum or a reasonably good momentum in the area or globally, it's much easier to benefit out of a good momentum. What I was trying to say is that Lebanon has domestic issue, I agree, even though if I think about more recently in Europe, in Belgium, we had a period of 2 years of interim government that were the best 2 years of defined leadership, both at central government and monetary institution like central bank, as you pointed out. Obviously, it's more difficult to sort domestic problem, but it's very difficult for any government at the moment in Lebanon, in the middle of a war, to establish an agenda who actually can be convincing on the growth prospect. It should have been using a global momentum that is faltering. So is a cumulative problem. I wouldn't blame just a domestic dynamic. That is clearly is clear where it is, and they agree the lack of a leadership is extremely complicated. But unfortunately, Lebanon is not alone in this. If I think about here, I'm talking from France today, and France is in a serious trouble of lack of leadership. England is in a serious trouble of lack of leadership. So is not the only one, and that is a bigger problem, I would say.
How do you see the long-term economic consequences of such the problems that are facing Lebanon, whether it's global or domestic, and all what you've talked about? And there has been, of course, challenges due to the current escalation and the displacements of many people forced out of their homes. What do you think the impact of this on on Lebanon's population distribution and the economic productivity?
Yeah, clearly, I mean, when it's very difficult to now talk about productivity when we are facing a human issue, and so an emergency. So I understand they look a bit cynical to talk about this, but it's true that
that's why I said in my question a long term.
Yeah, exactly. But exactly. So please forgive me if I seem cynical in trying to look at the long-term perspective, but that's exactly what you ask. Every time there is a situation like this of instability due to war, we all know that actually there are a lot of opportunities that can arise from reconstruction and rebuilding. Bear in mind that we have at the moment a potential shift of powers toward what is called the global south, of which Lebanon is part of, that include as well a tendency of some country to try to de-dollarize the world. And so clearly, if this is the case, Lebanon is in the middle of this trend with all the Middle East who are actually heading this global south, the more role that all the southern countries should play, what is they identify themselves as a global south. So in reality, backing this trend could be extremely profitable for Lebanon. I wouldn't say that it should go back to be the Switzerland of the Middle East, as it was pointed out before civil war, but clearly Lebanon, considering its cultural root and considering the strategic position it may play, if the global south, the BRICS, more intertwine exchange of commodity no longer in dollar but in local currency, can play a bigger role for Lebanon. So Lebanon can play a role in this.
Okay, now let's talk more about the immediate actions that should be taken right now. What are the immediate steps that could be taken to rebuild the sectors that have been critically affected, and how long do you think that recovery could take?
So first of all, in terms of time that we recover, I think is more a geopolitical issue than an economic issue. Assuming that, and hopefully this war will end soon, I would say that clearly on the infrastructure, that is, again, is not a Lebanon problem, is a much wider problem. The rebuilding of infrastructure is a necessity. Obviously, with all the new technology, we talk about artificial intelligence, can play a role in terms of productivity, and things can be rebuilt. Bear in mind that all the Middle East can play a bigger role for all the requirement of more energy for data center required, and the delocalization of data centers. So yes, Lebanon can play particularly a strategic role in this, but we are talking about infrastructure rebuilding. Infrastructure rebuilding is not a short-term recipe. It's at least 3 to 5 years to start with. So assuming that the geopolitical issue will be sorted, hopefully in a reasonable time, that we all hope, there is no justification for any war, particularly this one. We are talking about 3 to 5 years to start rebuilding on infrastructure, and then again on the role in the middle of the global south, building as a presence, as a firm foot in the global economic geopolitical equilibrium.
Okay, finally, to what extent do you believe the World Bank's $250 million to fund renewable energy projects could stabilize Lebanon's energy sector during these difficult times?
I'm not sure it's going to stabilize, but it's definitely a good start. I mean, the IMF policy normally to start with a specific package, but it's never just a one and only. So I'm pretty sure that above all with the Georgieva leadership, that we have seen already in other countries, when they see that the agenda that has been agreed between, in this case, Lebanon and IMF is followed through, is respected, all the deadline, the IMF can continue building and investing. So definitely under whatever the initial package, let's assume that the 250 initial package would be properly invested. I think it's just the starting of a process. It's clearly important for the renewable energy industry, but it's not enough. We underestimate the bigger role that this investment in green energy can have as well on inflation side. So bear in mind that these are inflating policy.